everybody, it's Romania Black, and we are on part 13 of our journey into Heaven Official's Blessing, looking at chapters 48 through 50 tonight. We do not have a manhwa, sadly. Hashtag tears. But that's okay. Next week we'll have a manhwa chapter come out and hopefully see maybe that giant monstrosity worm chasing Xie Lian and the Windmaster. We'll see. But yeah, we're officially like halfway through volume 2, which is exciting. Just this volume and 6 more to go. There's going to be a lot of Heaven Official's Blessing. So I appreciate y'all being patient with me, only going a few chapters at a time. But honestly, there's so much in each of these chapters that we can talk about that it feels like we just need to just focus on that and go from there, right? So with that being said, I do have a few comments before we get into this look at chapters 48 through 50. So Pichu was talking about Xie Lian, and talking about Xie Lian's sexuality and how Xie Lian, has maybe, taken this vow of being chaste and abstinence, but also Xie Lian kind of maybe being on the ace spectrum. And I've wanted to talk about it for a while now, but I do think that Xie Lian might be like demisexual or on the ace spectrum, in that they're just not really sexually attracted to anyone. And it could be because of their cultivation or otherwise, right? We don't know, right? And I don't want to know any details about his past yet as we come up with them in the story, but I thought that was really good to know. But also, I like Pichu pointing this out, that Junwoo versus Hua Cheng. Hua Cheng seems to understand that Xie Lian has changed from how he was as the crown prince 800 years ago. And Hua Cheng seems to recognize that Xie Lian is not the same person that he was before. So even though he gives him the armory, he knows Xie Lian still likes swords and likes the armory. And he kind of takes him there himself just to kind of feel it out. I feel like that chapter where Hua Cheng's like, what do you think of this? And Xie Lian's like, oh my God, the armory. It was like Hua Cheng was just showing him like, oh, do you still like swords? If not, I'll find something else that you like, right? But I feel like Hua Cheng is accepting of the fact that Xie Lian has changed over this long period of time and isn't who he was before. Whereas Junwoo seems to assume or is maybe in denial of that fact because he gives Xie Lian the big palace and everything, and it's exactly the way it was 800 years ago. But it's like, Xie Lian's not the same as he was 800 years ago. So can we really, is he really, what is Junwoo doing? So I obviously don't want answers, but we'll just see where it goes from there. But I thought that was an interesting comment to make, Pichu, so I like that. Kixkay talks about Xie Lian's lack of self-worth, making him think that it is really sad because he kind of made him think that Mu Qing was just coming to like be nosy and find out the gossip, when the reality was, no, Mu Qing actually cared about Xie Lian and was coming to ask him if he wanted any medicine. So it is really sad that Xie Lian has such low self-worth that he doesn't think that he's worthy of being doted on by anyone. And it's like, Xie Lian, right? Also, Kixkay was talking about how Mu Qing is kind of like the Jiang Chong of Heaven Official's Blessing, which I think seems pretty fit. Chang and Mu Qing seem to have very similar tsundere personalities. But like I was telling Kixkay, I don't want to know how characters change as we go. I want you all to keep that hushed with me because I want to be surprised and find out. Like with Modao Zushi, one of the cool things was finding out how characters change over time and how our impressions of this change. And this is an even longer story with even more characters. So I don't want people being like, oh, well, they're mean now, but then they become a cinnamon bun later. I'm like, I don't want to know that. I want to figure that out as I read and be surprised. So that's just a heads up about that. Shiki Ling tried to like apply a little bit of the timeline. And again, I'm trying not to get too much into it because I want to figure it out as I go. But their comment didn't have any spoilers in it. It was pretty just straightforward in saying that all we know really is that we have 800 years ago when Xie Lian ascended as a 17-year-old, that 3 years later he descended, and then there's like a 500-year gap, half a thousand years. We don't really know what happened yet during that time, so there's that. But we do know that 300 years ago he was Fang Xin, which was the Guoshi that was with Chuanchu. And then 100 years later, he was with Banyu, and then now he's ascended for the third time. So we're not exactly sure where the second ascension happened. We're not exactly sure about a lot of details. We just know that the Banyu incident and Fang Xin are about 100 years apart. So, and it seems like Xie Lian's personality is much different when he met Banyu than it was with Chuanchu. So there's stuff going on there. But again, I'm gonna figure it out. So I just want to just figure it out as I go, right? But I think that was an interesting thing to point out, that the timeline has slowly come together. I'm gonna probably bring Conspiracy Board Sama out at some point, and like by the end of this series, Conspiracy Board Sama, we're just gonna map the whole thing out, right? So that's fun. That's a fun time. But yeah, Sarah Linda talked about Mu Qing, Mu Qing's attitude towards Xie Lian, and kind of the idea that maybe Mu Qing might have been interested in knowing what, like, was Xie Lian really as innocent and idealistic as he was back when him and Feng Shen were first following him, or was he always kind of jaded like this? And it almost seems like Mu Qing wants to know, like, were you always like secretly like this, like that you'd kill a whole family, or was that all just, you know, different than how you presented to us? Like, Mu Qing seems genuinely interested in knowing, like, what is the real Xie Lian, right? But also, I love Sarah Linda's comment that at the end of this last chapter, we have the Chaos King and Bad Luck Incarnate off together on a journey. What could happen? Right? Everybody was like, who knows what'll happen? I have no clue. I'm going to this completely blind. So I am so excited to see what's going to happen in these 3 chapters. Y'all, I'm sure you know how excited I am, but I'm very excited. So in any case, SQQLBH314 talked about how the Windmaster is basically taking care of Banyu and Long Ying, is basically the fairy godmother / fairy godfather, which I was like, that's great. That's perfect for the Windmaster. And that it is sad that Xie Lian, he tells Lan Chanchu in the flashbacks that he doesn't need to learn these techniques that apply self-harm because he's the crown flower prince. He's the crown prince of Yong, and he doesn't need to know these things. And SQQLBH314 was like, that kind of sucks because, and Anime Annie talked about this too, but Xie Lian was a crown prince himself as well. So it's like Xie Lian's self-worth, like, dude, you need to just, like, self-care, think more of yourself, have some more respect for yourself. And it's like, I feel like Hua Cheng would like him to have that as well, right? But also, they also talked about how in the early drafts of this story, because this story was originally released by MXTX, and was kind of revised later on during publication, which is kind of cool. And I want to kind of tread this very carefully. I feel like this was not a spoiler and it's okay, but I want to be very careful in the treadings of what was draft and what is, you know, final draft, because I don't want anything to accidentally slip out. But I feel like this is okay to mention. But they talked about how in the early drafts of the story, Yiming was said by Junwu. When Junwu warns Xie Lian not to touch Yiming, in the earlier drafts, it was said that if you're cut by Yiming, then it is a wound that will make someone suffer forever. And even if it heals completely, Hua Cheng will have control of that wound and can make it open up and bleed whenever he wants to. Which is pretty scary, right? That you think you're fully healed and then Hua Cheng's like, nah, I think you should be cut again. And it just like all opens up and starts bleeding without your control. That's pretty terrifying. So I kind of like that that was included in the earlier drafts of the story. But then obviously we kind of, you know, we got to make him a puppy dog and crying, right? So what can we do with that? And then finally, Anime Annie said that Xie Lian is very quiet on the matter of what happened with the Yongin royal family, which is funny because Xie Lian's been very talkative this entire time and talking about how important communication is, but he's very quiet about this. So again, I trust me, I have filed back in my brain that we are going to go back to this whole thing with Yongin and Feng Shen. It is going to keep coming back. I know it is, and I don't want to know anything. I know it will. I'll file it away and we'll get the crumbs as we go. So thank you for being patient with me. Basically is the moral of this question section. Y'all are patient and I really, really appreciate it. But I've talked enough. We've talked for nearly 10 minutes. We need to start this proper. So I'm so excited. I have no clue what to expect, y'all. None whatsoever. So I have no clue what the chapters are called. I have no clue. I haven't looked at the picture, nothing. We have no Manhua chapter this week. It's just going to be, I'm diving in as blind as possible. And I can't wait. So yeah. So that's what we're going to do. We are going to start chapter 48 and just go from there and just see what happens. But we are going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's do this. Chapter 48, Adroit dice for the safety of only one. Oh, what's wrong? This is making you mean like nothing's wrong. Don't mind it. Oh. How did he connect the distance shortening array to the heavenly court? How do we open this door? Oh. Me. I think I know. Oh, suffered this trick of Hua Cheng's when we were on our mission. Take 2 dice and toss them before the door to see if it opens. Oh, no. Okay. Yeah, he was casually tossing dice for fun in the main hall. Oh, uh-oh. Oh, stop. Be careful. Don't. Oh. But it's all depleted. Oh, so he can't even talk to them. Oh, no. Oh. But then what will happen? Oh, too vulgar for the ear. For censorship reasons, the word shall not be repeated. Oh my God. For that to not be repeated after what we've heard in this story. What is this place? Oh, and the Windmaster's like, oh, I forgot to tell you, if you don't roll right, you'll end up somewhere terrible. What number did you roll? A 4. Oh no. Oh, they're gonna probably end up where the cannibals are. Oh. San Long, what does a roll of 4 open up to? Depends. The door will open to whatever the roller fears the most. Oh! You fought to roll first and rolled out a woman's bath. Give me the dice! Oh, because Feng Sheng is not good with ladies. Oh no. Oh, and Xie Lian being like embarrassed for him. He always kept his distance from women and always stayed away from even speaking of them, as if the female sex were savage wild beasts. To him, a woman's bath really was the scariest place on earth, worse than the immeasurable depths of a tiger's cave or dragon's lakes. It seemed Wu Qing had successfully taken the dice, and Xie Lian sighed a breath of relief. But not a moment later, the two roared again. Oh, the Windmaster woefully called. What'd you run into this time? Only burbling sounds. Oh, black marsh crocodiles. Turns out the two of them were barely 2 steps out of the women's bath in a frenzy when Wu Qing took the dice and by force and rolled, and their next step led them to fall in a muddling marsh. They were immediately submerged past their waists into the muddy marsh over their mouths. After fighting to get out, a dozen curiously long crocodile monsters swam over to surround each of them. The monsters were over 4 meters in length and fed on human flesh. They grew human arms and legs from such evil practices. What? When they moved, the sight was terrifying and gross, making the two disgusted beyond belief. What? The two fought the crocs in fever and fervor and madness until Feng Sheng had had enough. Give me the dice, let me roll. You didn't roll anything good either. Oh, croc monsters are still more decent than a women's bath. Who knows what you'll roll next? Give it to me. Fucking. Did you already take the dice? Where are they? Oh my God. Oh my God. And they forgot they were connected to the communication array and continued to fight each other, denouncing their luck. Oh my God. The heavenly officials are just sitting there like the riot was exciting. 2 generals finally ripped through their masks and stopped caring about their faces. The officials held back their laughter, some even slamming their fists in their own seats, wishing desperately they could be watching this live to cheer the fight on. Oh, interesting. Although their luck didn't seem the best, they were still martial gods. And a few monsters here and there were at most a nuisance. They were not in any true danger. Xie Lian prayed they would give up sooner rather than later and be released from their predicament. Oh. He was thankful he didn't himself roll out a number that called forth any horrors and rolled out a Hua Cheng instead. Oh, I rolled snake eyes earlier. Does that mean every time snake eyes are rolled, I'll be able to see you? Ooh. Oh. The moment he ended his sentence, he realized his words sounded a little weird, as if he really wanted to meet Hua Cheng and thought it inappropriate. No. Oh. If you wanted to see me, it won't matter what you roll. I will appear. And forgot everything else he wanted to say. Oh! He had the chance to dissect the meaning of these words before the voice of another said in a sunken voice within this communication array, "Let me!" It wasn't long after the person had spoken, there was a flash of white light drawn across the sky and a crashing sound. And suddenly Hua Cheng and Xie Lian's path was blocked. Oh, when the white light cooled and slowly cleared away, Xie Lian saw that the thing that flew from the sky and that was blocking them was now a sword. The sword was long and slender, half entombed into the ground on a slant, the body of the sword itself quivering. The sword was dark like black jade, deep and foreboding. Smoother than a mirror, and if anyone were to go near, they could see their own reflection on the blade. Only the thin silver-white line of the heart of the sword cut across the blade in half. The name of the sword was Feng Shin. A shadow landed in front of the sword and said, "This is your sword." Oh! Oh, shit! No! After the death of the Goshi Feng Shin, the sword he carried was kept by the crown prince of Yong'an. The only one who had thrown the sword, Feng Shin, the one who had thrown the sword and blocked their path, was none other than Long Chuanchu. Oh my god, he's right in front of them. Oh no! It looked like Feng Shin and Mu Qing had failed, but Long Chuanchu was able to roll the right numbers. It couldn't be said whether it was because of his luck or Xie Lian's misfortune. The only thing that could be said with certainty was of the two crown princes, Chuanchu had always been more fortunate than Xie Lian. Oh, so Hua Cheng just standing there unchanged. Oh, so Chuanchu's blocking the road. I only want to duel with you with all my might. It doesn't matter how this ends. Even if I die in your hands, I won't ask for any compensation. I don't need you to ask the great lord for banishment. You taught me the art of swordsmanship. It's not like you can't win. So why won't you fight me? Yeah, no, Xie Lian does not want to see him be hurt, but at the same time, he's like he's going to keep following him until he does. Fine. Oh, you asked for this. Oh, he pulled it from the ground. Feng Shin means affection of a young woman. Ooh. After hundreds of years, Feng Shin finally returned to the hands of its master. It moaned softly in Xie Lian's hands. Oh. Hua Cheng's eyes shone from hearing the euphoric cries of that sword. Oh, what is this? What is this? What? Oh. However this duel ends, do not regret it. I will never. Oh my god. Oh. He felt like his head was going to split. Both his hands held the long sword tightly, not daring to be careless for even a moment, and dashed like an arrow. When his body froze as if something had wrapped tightly and he fell heavily to the ground, he lowered his head to see he found he really was bound. A snow-white silk band was wrapped multiple times like a poisonous snake. Oh, wait! Oh, it was Ruyi! Oh! He had been taught swordsmanship by the Goshi Feng Shin ever since he was young, and he held fear and reverence for the Goshi, even after blood spilt like rivers at the gilded banquet. That awe never had ceased. The moment Xie Lian touched the sword, he spent his entire focus on the other's movement and never noticed there was a white silk band that snuck behind to ambush him in the moment he was ready to attack. How could there be such a shameless thing? Oh! He threw Feng Shin aside and sent a long breath, thinking, whew, that was close. Oh! Struggling to break free. Oh. What is this? Let me go and fight us to the death. We already fought to the death. The thing that's binding you is one of my spiritual devices. You already lost. How can this count? When I said fight to the death, obviously I meant using a sword to fight. Use a sword if you're a man. Ambushing with a white ribbon? How cunning. He thought the sword was the best of all weapons and didn't think much of his words. But it sounded like he was a male official who was prejudiced against using white silk bands. Clearly anti-Ruyi. But Xie Lian didn't care whether he acted like a man or not. He'd cross-dressed before and hung the words, "I can't get erect" on his lips. Nothing could get to him. Yeah, it's like sticks and stones have broken his bones and words are useless against him. Oh, you didn't think things through, though. And you never said I had to use a sword. I used your loophole, so who are you going to tell? Oh, and he got serious. That's right, I ambushed you. So what? I succeeded. Yes, I was cunning. But so what? I won. If your opponent was anyone other than me, you would already be dead. Hua Cheng stood not far from the two and laughed soundlessly, crossing his arms and looked away. Chuanchu was shocked to the core. When that person was the Goshi, all his teachings were honorable and conscientious, straightforward and genuine. He never thought there'd be the day that when he'd hear from the lips of his once teacher something like, "Yes, I ambushed, so what? I succeeded, yes, I was cunning, but so what? I won." He was stunned. Think about it on your own. Next time, don't get in others' way. Oh my gosh. Okay. Oh my gosh. Ha! And that was one chapter already. Oh my gosh. Ah! Okay. Chapter 49. Adroit dies for the safety of only one. Part 2. Okay. Oh, we're getting into this. Okay. Did my parents and I not treat the remaining citizens of Shanli well? I did my best to protect them. Every word he said was the truth. Okay, so after the kingdom had fallen, many remaining citizens never forgot their roots. And even after it was built and started its rule, the people and their descendants continued to live on as people of Shanla, often clashing with the people of the new kingdom. Oh, so the first few generations ruled with force and cruelly massacred many of the rioting Shanla people. But there were underground alliances formed. So they're still they were against each other even after they'd been absorbed by them. However, with the rule of Chanshu's parents, the king took on a different attitude. He treated the people with kindness and compassion. He wanted to unite the country of the old and the new against all voices of dissent. Even if the idea of granting princely titles to past Shanli royals was absurd, he used it as a way to show his sincerity and regarded them with respect. Chanshu himself had never been prejudiced because of that past hatred. Everything was but history. The Guoxi Fengshen was a mysterious figure, having never revealed his true identity, so no one knew on which side stood the mastermind behind the Gilded Banquet bloodbath. However, the hatred between Yong'an and Shanli ran too deep. Both sides would accuse each other whenever anything should happen, and so many of the surviving nobles all pointed their fingers at Shanli and used the chance to request for the complete annihilation of the remaining people of Shanla. Yet Chanshu had rejected all their efforts. His determination protected the lives of many and prevented them from suffering a nameless genocide. However, now that he was reminiscing, the more good he did, the more wronged he felt now. Not that he felt that what he'd done was worthless, but he felt deeply aggrieved. It's never worthless to do what you think is right, but to have sworn so much benevolence without reciprocation, he couldn't have helped but feel wronged. His eyes reddened and he continued to question, did I not do enough? Did my parents do something wrong? Why must you treat me like this? The more vexed he became and struggled against Rui's bindings once more, straining to lift his upper body. Do you not think you owe us an explanation? I can't give you one. Guoxi, you've changed so much. You were never like this before. I remember I'd already told you long ago not to venerate me as an incorruptible saintly figure. I'm nothing like the person in your mind. In the end, you'll only disappoint yourself. Oh, the past you and the present you. I don't know which one is the real you anymore. They're all me, but you were only 17 back then. Now that you're older, of course I'd be teaching you a different lesson. Oh, shit, okay. Oh, was it because your 17th was a trial that you had to turn my 17th into a trial too? Oh, if that was your intention, then I won't let you have your way. Oh, as if a roaring flame was burning within his eyes, like he was declaring war. Oh, if you want me to fill my heart with hatred like you, I surely won't. If you're going to force me to abandon myself, I refuse. I will never, no matter what you do to me, I will never become like you. It was a declaration so heroic that Xie Lian became dazed just listening to it. It took a moment before he came to and burst into laughter. Chanshu's face was covered with fiery tears, his blood boiling with passion. He was at the height of his zealous cries, but all that was deflated by Xie Lian's laugh, and he became angrily bewildered. Xie Lian, on the other hand, was clapping as he laughed, his laughter growing by the minute, and he cried, "Good!" Xie Lian couldn't remember the last time he'd laughed this heartily, or for what, and it took him some time before ceasing. He rubbed his eyes and nodded. "Good. Remember what you said, that you will never become like me." Hua Cheng still had his arms crossed and watched coldly. Just as Xie Lian finished speaking, there was suddenly a blast of red smoke before him. What? The explosion came too suddenly, and Xie Lian jolted, thinking Lan Chanshu must have used some strange trick, and immediately evaded, his gaze watchful. However, the blast was loud and sound only and didn't pose any harm. When the smoke had cleared, Chanshu had disappeared from where he laid. What was left was a Daruma doll, swaying left and right. The Daruma doll had a very round face and body like a giant squash. Its brows were black and its expression like a tiger, cute and juvenile. At that moment, it was glaring, plump with anger, and it carried a fat sword on its back, gallant in its form, exactly like Chan-Chu, except as a lovable big toy. Chan-Chu! Ryu let go and returned to wrap itself around Xie Lian's wrist. Hua Cheng rocked over leisurely and flicked his finger on the body of the Daruma doll, laughing. Why does he look so foolish no matter what form he takes? Xie Lian picked up the Daruma doll and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. This San Long is Chan-Chu. Why did he turn into this form? Stop playing around with him and change him back. No. Take him along and let's go. What? 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 Go where? Just then the two had come to a cramped little cave. Oh my god, no. If stuff happens between Hua Cheng and Xie Lian and Long Chan-Chu has to sit there and watch as a doll, I'm gonna lose it. No. This little cave. Oh, he tossed up the dice and it landed in his palm. He lowered his eyes to glance at it before entering the cave. To turn someone into a Daruma doll was such a mischievous spell, and it was very much Hua Cheng's style, but it was also hard to undo. Either way, Xie Lian couldn't unravel it, and he couldn't guarantee that any other heavenly officials could do it either. So he held the doll in his hands and was just about to follow Hua Cheng when he remembered the tossed Feng Xin and doubled back to pick up the sword. He strapped it to his back and chased after Hua Cheng. Xie Lian wanted Hua Cheng to undo the spell, but the man was non-committal. The two walked around in the cave for a bit, and soon after it became wider and more spacious than the entrance. Footfalls echoed in the cave, and some distance in front of them came a faint light and sounds of singing. When Xie Lian was led to Paradise Manor in the Ghost City, he had also heard singing, but the graceful songs of charming female ghosts were enticing and beautiful, like an aphrodisiac, intoxicating. This was like a chaotic dance of demons, appalling and hideous. The two were nothing alike. Ooh, what is this place? Shh. What is happening? Oh. Xie Lian's question was already voiced in near whisper. Hearing the shush, he held his breath. He soon discovered why they need to be silent. Right in front of them came bunches of floating green ghost fires. Oh, and when the little bunches of flames approached, he saw they were little ghosts dressed in green. Are we about to get Qi Rong? Are we getting into Qi Rong things? On the heads of each little ghost was a small flaming light, as if they themselves were a green candle. There was nowhere to hide in this cave, and the path was narrow. Xie Lian was about to reach for Feng Xin, but thought Ruyu would be better suited for the situation and dropped his hand again. But then, just as the little ghosts passed by them, they didn't bat an eyelash before moving on, continuing to whisper amongst themselves. It was like they didn't see them, but more so, that they didn't think it was strange to see them. Xie Lian looked at Hua Cheng, and the one standing next to him wasn't the exceptionally handsome red-clad ghost king he knew, but another little pale ghost with a green flame on its head. And so it seemed that Hua Cheng had changed them into fake skins without him knowing when it had happened. Thinking that he himself must be upholding a green flame above his head, Xie Lian couldn't help but raise a hand to feel. Why must they transform into such a bizarre appearance? Although he trailed off, Hua Cheng obviously knew what he wanted to say. I already mentioned that the green ghost Qi Rong is vulgar and crass. All of his lackeys have to look like this. Xie Lian didn't realize that Hua Cheng had brought him to the green ghost Qi Rong's territory. Oh my god! Oh, I'm here! It's happening! It's happening! Best date ever! Ah! Before, when the heavens and the ghost realm mentioned the green ghost Qi Rong, they all had to comment on just how uncouth he was, and Xie Lian couldn't fathom why. Now he learned that all of his little ghost subordinates had to dress like this. He could somewhat understand. Going by the title, The Night Touring Green Lantern, there was at least still a trace of sarcastic elegance. But if it was literally green light walking around at night, then there's definitely a gap between that and what he had in mind. Didn't you already destroy his lair? I did, but he escaped. escaped for 50 years, and then built a new lair. Xie Lian held the Lan Chanshu Daruma doll close to his chest and whispered after making sure there was no one else around. Sun Long, are you here to find the green ghost? Why don't you undo Chanshu's spell and let him go first, and then I'll accompany you? He refused. No, take him with you. I need him to meet someone. Xie Lian was curious. Hua Cheng didn't act like he cared much for Chanshu, so why would he take him to meet anyone specific, especially... But all of his options were rather awkward, so he didn't speak any more on the subject. When the two finally emerged from the cave and the tunnel opened to a wider space, more caves appeared before them. There seemed to be caves and tunnels dug all over the mountain. Caves connecting caves. Tunnels leading to more tunnels. Each entrance had a number of ghosts with a green lantern on their head going in and out, like a giant beehive or an anthill. If Xie Lian had come in by himself, there'd be no way he'd remember the way. Yet Hua Cheng acted like he was at home and traversed through the various tunnels and caves without hesitation, exceedingly at ease, like he knew the paths by heart. Like he's been here before. The two of them had on their green-flamed little ghost skin, and no one stopped them in their paths. He breathed a sigh of relief, but Hua Cheng thought he was sighing and said, "What's wrong?" "Oh, nothing. I thought you would attack the lair head-on instead of sneaking in, so I'm not too good with fighting, so I'm relieved." He meant it when he said he wasn't good at fighting. He may be skilled, but he wasn't good at dealing with the aftermath. Oh, Hua Cheng seemed to have puffed a laugh. "I did attack head-on the first time, but the moment he found out, he ran away. This time I'm here for his person, so of course I can't have him notice I'm here." Oh, was the person Hua Cheng wanted Chanshu to meet the green ghost? Was there a relationship between the two of them? Well, whatever he wants to do, I'll still accompany him, and then ask him to undo the spell later. Okay, Xie Lian's like, let's just roll with it. I trust him. Oh, what? Oh, okay, so Xie Lian, he's like, I'll just follow Hua Cheng, and he's trusting him, but he also still feels guilty about the manor burning, so he's like, I'll just follow Hua Cheng and see what we can do with this. That useless trash can't do anything, but he's very vigilant. Those little ghosts can't approach his person, and it's not easy disguising as his closest henchman. To get close, there's only one way. Huh. The little ghosts had behind them a trail of bound humans. Oh, dragged by a long rope. Among the humans, some were ragged and unkempt, and some in extravagant clothes, but they all seemed to be young men and women under the age of 30. There was even a child who was grabbing onto the corner of a sleeve of one of the young men. They were probably father and son. Their hands were bound and looking terrified, some ready to faint, while trudging through the demonic lair. They brushed past Hua Cheng, and without missing a beat, he turned around and seamlessly joined the end of the march. He elbowed Xie Lian and repeated, "Okay." Oh, and this time he was a clean-cut young man. He himself probably... So they just changed his appearance again. Hua Cheng is just like master of disguise. He's like, let's just change it right now. Oh. The little band made twists and turns to the tunnels and caves, the little ghosts leading the group, and they seemed to be quite content in their duties. If you ruin our great one's appetite, we'll teach you what it's like to want to die. Of the 4 great calamities, there had never been word that the other 3 supremes devoured human flesh. Only the green ghost Qi Rong was gluttonous in this manner. No wonder his enemies and equals scoffed at any mention of him, dismissing him as unsightly and ignorant. Earlier, Hua Cheng said there was only one way to get close to the ghost Qi Rong, and it appeared that mixing in with the food was the way. Oh, ew. As he walked, Xie Lian reached for his hand. Once he grabbed a hold of it, he felt Hua Cheng freeze. Oh, because he grabbed his hand like he wanted to pull away. It wasn't that Xie Lian didn't notice, but under the circumstances, there wasn't much room for thought. He held Hua Cheng's hand tight and lightly drew the word into his palm. Save. Since he saw this, he must save these people. He was informing Hua Cheng of his intentions. After the word was written, Hua Cheng gently folded his fingers and closed his palm. A moment later, the band exited a tunnel and proceeded to enter an exceedingly large cave. Oh my gosh! MXTX with her hand sexiness. I can't. Oh my god. Okay, so, but what's his response going to be? Oh my god. Oh, the moment they entered the cave, a field of shadowed objects entered their vision. Xie Lian squinted and hadn't quite made out what those objects were, but instead he felt Hua Cheng grip his wrist and drew a few words on the back of his palm. Watch your head, don't touch. At first, Xie Lian thought there hung many rags from above, but when he looked closer, his pupils shrank. What rags? It was a field of blackened, tightly packed people. Feet above, heads hung low, suspended in midair. A forest of upside-down corpses. Just like at the beginning. No. However, although there hung those flip dead bodies, there was no bloody rain because those corpses were dried without a drop of fresh blood left in their veins. The expressions on those dried corpses all looked to be in pain. Their mouths opened wide, and there was a thin layer of snow-like crystals on their bodies and faces. It was salt. In the deepest recesses of the cave, the light shone bright, and there was a giant chair, a long table, golden goblets, and jaded utensils. Such extravagance made it look like a royal banquet hall rather than the deep mountain cave. A bit further away from the long table was an enormous steel cauldron, big enough to allow over 10 people to swim within. Red boiling water bubbled in rage in the cauldron. If anyone should accidentally fall in, it would only be seconds before they were cooked through. The 4 little ghosts ushered the group of prisoners towards the cauldron, but some fell to the ground shivering in fear when they saw what was waiting for them. And in the midst of yelling, hitting, and pulling, Xie Lian suddenly felt next to him Hua Cheng's arm went stiff and stopped in his step. He turned his head to see, and although Hua Cheng still had on the appearance of a clean-cut young man, his eyes were blazing with rage. Even though Hua Cheng was always smiling, Xie Lian knew his true emotions were always hidden deep within. Xie Lian had never seen his eyes of violent fury this blatant. He followed Hua Cheng's sight, and the next moment felt his own breathing stop. Before the extravagant giant chair, there knelt a person. On the first glance, it was a person, but upon closer look, it was actually a stone statue the size of a real person. It was a rather interesting statue, sculpted in a kneeling position, its back facing him, its head downcast. It was the very form that could be described as a dog with its tail between its legs. It was easy to presume the only purpose of making such a statue was for humiliating this person. Xie Lian didn't need to turn the statue around to know that its face must be the exact same as his own. What? What? Oh, before the extravagant giant chair, there knelt a statue of Xie Lian? And that's why Hua Cheng's pissed? What? Why? What does Qi Rong have against Xie Lian? What? But, oh my gosh. Okay. Are we still chapter 50? Oh, thank God. What? Chapter 50, Adroit dice for the safety of only 1-3. Generally, people would not know what their own backs looked like, but Xie Lian was different. He was more familiar with how his own back looked. He was more than familiar with how his own back looked. When the kingdom of Shanli first fell, to relieve themselves of anger, the people burnt down his Baquian Tazi temple, desecrated all of his statues, and robbed the gems on his sword and cleaned his attire of gold. Yeah, after all that, the rage continued to burn, and so they came with a new idea. It was to build such kneeling statues. The crown prince was highly venerated and worshipped. The crown prince that was highly venerated and worshipped was sculpted into the form of one who knelt and begged for forgiveness, and placed in crowded areas of town so everyone was free to spit at or kick when they passed by, and rid themselves of misfortune. Or worse, some even had him sculpted to be prostrating, and used the statue directly as a threshold, allowing tens of thousands to walk all over it. In the first 10-20 years after the kingdom of Shanli fell, those statues were a common sight in many of the cities and towns. So how could Xie Lian himself not recognize his own back? Oh my God! Oh! And just then, the voice of a young man said, that little hyena Pei Su had to hug the bitch legs of that man-whore Pei before he could ascend. So who does he think he is? He's nothing more than an exiled wild dog to ruin my plans. Once I'm through with him, even the winds dry up. Even after the winds dry up his corpse, no one would dare go collect it. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. What are we even doing? Oh my God. Oh my God. Before the person himself had appeared, cussing was already heard. Xie Lian gazed over and saw a figure clad in green float in the cave. Due to a reason somehow not worth mentioning, Xie Lian couldn't help but look to the top of his head first, and was actually kind of disappointed to see the person had only a mask on and no light above his head. A bunch of little ghosts dressed in green surrounded this green-clad man, and he stood as if he was surrounded by a circle of green light. This must be one of the 4 calamities in the ghost realm, the green ghost Qi Rong. Ever since Nan Fong had first mentioned the name Qi Rong, Xie Lian had kept in the back of his mind and wondered if this Qi Rong was the same Qi Rong he knew. However, there was an unwritten rule that no matter if one was a demon or ghost, they would all hide their real names and bury their past lives. Oh! Because of this, he didn't think they were the same person, only that the fake name had coincided with the real one. Yet from the looks of things, he was more than certain. If it wasn't that Qi Rong he knew, how could there be another Qi Rong who is obsessed with the statue of the kneeling crown prince? And why would the sound of his voice be so familiar? What, he knows Qi Rong? Excuse me? The little green ghosts that surround Qi Rong were loudly acclaiming him king and wildly chattered, so Xie Lian somewhat figured out what had transpired. It turns out when Qi Rong had sent a few of his henchmen to the ghost city, they failed in causing havoc and was decimated by Hua Cheng. He regrouped and was ready to fight again. But before the second round had even started, the henchmen bumped into the exiled Pei Su on the road. Although exiled in the mortal realm, Pei Su was nevertheless once a heavenly official and had nothing better to do, so when the henchmen bumped into him, he thought he might as well clean them up. So they were once again decimated. Okay, so Pei Jr. just came in, stopped the party from happening. Okay, to lose so many henchmen in a short period of time, the moment Qi Rong received the news, he was furious and cursed non-stop. Like ancestors, like descendants, that fucking man whore Pei Ming probably has sores all over his crotch. I should chop off both his and Pei Su's fucking dicks and hang them at their temples. And whoever worships them will bleed pus with every step. Oh my god! Xie Lian had to really suppress the urge to cover his ears. The profanities were the same. When Feng Xin got upset, his curses were also too vulgar for ears. But as much as he swore, it was obvious they were only words of temporary anger with no real malintent. Qi Rong's curses were different. The recipients had no doubt that he truly wanted to curse them to die as crudely as the way he was condemned. And he was wholly unafraid to take cheap shots, though thoroughly crass and obscene. Ooh, that group of little green ghosts agreed with Qi Rong loudly. He probably remembered the able subordinates he worked so hard to raise and continued. Too bad the strong-spirited woman Shanji was captured by those 2 shameless pay dogs and was wronged so miserably. She couldn't be saved even now. Xie Lian couldn't agree with those words. Indeed, Shanji had a tragic story, but not everything was General Pei's fault like Qi Rong had described. After all, those 10 brides were kidnapped by her very person, and she was the one who killed them in cold blood. Strong-spirited for sure, but whether or not she was a good woman was debatable. But to say little Pei only ascended because he begged General Pei was something Xie Lian could not agree with. After seeing so many ascend and descend, there was one thing Xie Lian could say with absolute certainty. The skilled may not always ascend, but the ascended are always skilled. Ah, okay. If one is powerless, no matter who promoted them, they would not be able to overcome heavenly calamities and could only be at the most an official in the middle court. Xie Lian hadn't interacted much with Pei Su, but even he could see that Pei's martial power was above that of Chonchu. Oh, interesting. Okay. Only power didn't equal rank. There were politics at play too. Otherwise, Pei Su would have long since had gotten his own palace. Interesting. But obviously, those things weren't of consideration to Qi Rong. He swore like there wasn't a single one in all the realms he didn't want cursed to death. He called Pei Ming a man whore, Little Pei a leg-hugging dog, Junwu a faker, Ling Wen a bitch, and Lan Chanchu a moron, and Chan Zhizhen, shit, the Watermaster black-hearted, the Windmaster a slutty woman. He probably didn't know that Shi Qingshan was actually a man. If Xie Lian hadn't seen it for himself, he wouldn't be able to believe anyone could be so resentful. Finally, Qi Rong made it to the main point, which was how Hua Cheng and that low-key, ship-sinking Blackwater looked down on him. They were mere supremes. One day for sure he'd have them kneel before him. Xie Lian should be angry hearing this, but because he couldn't even imagine how that would even play out, he couldn't help but find it hilarious instead, and he stole a glimpse at Hua Cheng. Hua Cheng himself didn't have any reaction, but instead was still closely staring at the kneeling stone statue. Of course, Hua Cheng's like, this guy is making a mockery of my man. He must suffer. It all makes sense now. Finally, thankfully, Qi Rong seemed to have assuaged by all the cursing and changed the subject. How is the thing I sent you guys to do? Oh, have Chon Yi Shijin and that Manhua started fighting yet? Oh. He sat down as he spoke, lounging on his luxurious throne. He raised his legs and rested his boots on the shoulders of the statue, using it as a footstool. Xie Lian had been holding onto Hua Cheng's arm and stopped him immediately when he felt him shuffle a step forward. He felt the pull back may not be enough, so he drew another word in Hua Cheng's palm. Thanks. Hua Cheng recognized the word. He lowered his head and then glanced at Xie Lian, who was watching him with gratefulness in his eyes, thanking him for his good intentions. Xie Lian shook his head lightly and drew the words, listen, and heaven. Qi Rong was talking as if he sent henchmen to do something, and it had something to do with these two heavenly officials. It couldn't be anything good, so Xie Lian wanted to keep listening. As for the statue getting used as a footstool, thinking back, it had even been used as a threshold before, so it really meant nothing to Xie Lian. It was only a piece of rock, not his person. Although he had only written those 3 simple words, when their eyes met, Xie Lian knew that Hua Cheng had understood what he meant. Hua Cheng slowly held his hand tight and turned his head away, so Xie Lian could no longer see his expression. You're in the midst of this dastardly person's cave and you still make it romantic in MixTX? How? A little green ghost spoke up. We followed our king's instructions and have long since spread the rumors that Pei Ming wants to make Pei Su the martial god of the West. Oh! Now it's becoming more and more of a riot, so we use that as an excuse and desecrate hundreds of Ming Guang's temples disguised as Qi Ying's palace's devotees. Oh! And no one was the wiser. My lord may not know, but those devotees are really stupid. They saw us smashing temples and smashed along with us with even more enthusiasm. Qi Rong was pleased. Keep fueling them. Chon Yijin can endure it, but I won't believe that Manhua Pei Ming can put up with it. He really doesn't like Pei Ming at all! Oh my. Even if what they were spreading wasn't exactly a rumor, this kind of fabrication was still full of malintent, especially something as unscrupulous as disguising themselves as mortals to sabotage temples. Absolutely heinous, depraved, and perverse. No wonder that whenever Qi Rong was mentioned, everyone in the heavens would say he wasn't skilled, but extremely troublesome. Oh, if there's a chance, do tell Junwu to watch for any disputes between 2 heavenly officials caused by others. So he's like making mental notes, like, when I get back, I need to tell Junwu, like, hey, watch out for these guys, okay? Oh. When Qi Rong finished this business, he laid back, his pair of long legs. I imagined him being short, so the fact that he is tall is interesting. Resting on the statue changed positions. The ghosts knew what to do. And they went to the small crowd of people to pick out the best cut. The one child in the group was probably not even 10 years of age, and he wasn't very cognizant of the situation. He blinked his large eyes and held on tight to his father's shirt corner, yanking it the more scared he became. His young father's face was ashen pale, trying to comfort him with a trembling voice. Don't be scared, don't be scared. Yet it was obvious he was terrified to the bone. Oh no, it grabbed, oh no. Xie Lian moved before he knew what he was going to do, but then he felt movement from the figure next to him. He turned his head, and Hua Cheng had stepped out from within the crowd. Oh, okay. He should have removed the disguise. Xie Lian had no doubt that Hua Cheng was powerful enough to destroy everything within sight, and no one would be able to stop him yet. He didn't reveal his true form. Oh. Stop, what are you doing? What's with that little guy? Take him down. Won't you show a little respect in the presence of Shanli royalty? To make such a joke before me. Tell me, what branch of Shanli royal blood are you from? Which one? The Prince of Anli. Oh, he could feel the Chanchu Daruma doll in his arms jerk once. Prince Anli was the descendant of the Shanli royal family from the same generation as Chanchu, and could be said to be friends with Chanchu. What? What? Prince Anla, I think you're seeking your own death. Who told you to start shit in front of me? The person who appointed you didn't teach you a little history? Prince Anli was the last remaining royal blood of Shanli, and he's already dead. Who the fuck are you to pretend you're Shanli royalty in front of me? Oh, dead? How did he die? Take him down! Take down that odd piece of shit! What? Oh no! He smirked faintly. His expression was nonchalant before, but the next moment it was as if a layer of frost had been laid upon his face. His form flickered and disappeared, appearing the next blink behind Qi Rong. He grabbed the back of Qi Rong's head and smashed it down hard like a child playing with a ball. And who the fuck are you to be insolent before me? Oh! Oh! Okay. Oh my god. Charlie pulled the child behind himself to shield him. When the dust settled, Qi Rong had disappeared. At a closer look, he hadn't disappeared, but rather, his entire head was deeply embedded into the ground after Hua Cheng's blow. Oh, the humans and ghosts alike screamed and ran away. Don't run away. If the people lured all the ghosts from the cave, they'd be killed for sure. But of course, as always, no one listened to him. Oh, Xie Lian dropped his hands helplessly. Oh, there was no time to worry about the others. Hua Cheng slowly knelt down and he used one hand to grab a fistful of Qi Rong's hair and pulled out a bloodied head from the hole in the ground. And the body was pulled out along with the head. Oh, he burst out laughing. Although he was laughing, his eyes were off by 1,000,000 watts, eerie and terrifying. Ruyi flew out and struck away a few of the little green ghosts who were trying to cut down the escaping people. Xie Lian turned in a rush, his instincts telling him that something was very wrong. So long! So long! Qi Rong's mask had cracked, some pieces falling. He threw up a mouthful of blood and yelled, "Somebody stop him, y'all! Y'all come and stop him!" Hua Cheng was just violently bashing him, but now he seemed to be at ease, as if they were best buddies and chatting. Oh, didn't you know? There are some things in this world that are unstoppable, like the sun setting in the west. Also, an elephant squashing an ant. Or, for example, me taking your lowly life. By his last line, his face was savage and ferocious. He had in his hold Qi Rong's whole body, and he bashed it down to the ground again, and another loud bang. Qi Rong's body lay embedded in the ground and was smushed into a pool worse than mush. The mask on his face cracked, breaking into small pieces, revealing half a face. If anyone were to see that half a face, they'd discover a shocking fact. The green ghost Qi Rong and the crown prince of Shanli, one ghost, one god, a difference of hell and heaven, looked very much alike? What? What? Wait, what? No, what? No, that's not. No! You can't end it! No, you can't! MXTX, why? Why are you doing this? No! It's fine. Everything's fine, except it's not fine. Except it's not fine. No. Okay. like 2 weeks ago, fellow patron Ivan as Ida made this little image here, and they're a very good artist, and so they drew this really cute picture of me hanging over a cliff, being like, "Oh, well, look, it's Romania with one of MXTX's cliffhangers." Ha ha ha! And at the time, I was like, oh, that's cute. That one time I was gonna have a cliffhanger. That was fine. That'll never come and happen again. No! I don't know. I don't know if I can wait. I don't know if I can wait till the Manhua comes out. I don't know. I'm gonna have to be strong. I'm gonna have to be strong to hold out and wait until that Manhua chapter comes out to read chapters. My next ones were chapters 51 through 53. I'm gonna have to be strong. No! MXTX, why did I think that this was going to be a really cute date? Everybody was like, oh, it'll be a good date. They'll have some fun. They're going to go like to a palace or a garden or on an evening stroll. No, we're going to go into a calamity's den and find out that there's some messed up stuff going on and some mystery that I'm like, excuse me? Wait, what? Xie Lian knows Qi Rong? You just casually dropped that in the middle of a chapter and then abandoned it and expect me not to freak out? What? MXTX. MXTX, what are you doing? What are you doing? Oh, this is the midpoint of volume 2 and I'm losing my mind. So there we go. There's only one picture with this chapter. It's going to be on the thumbnail because it's Qi Rong. And look at there. Qi Rong with his feet up on the statue of Xie Lian. And with the mask. And looking kind of similar-ish to Xie Lian a little bit, only his hair's all frazzled and everything, but we can't really see his face. What are we doing? Obviously, I'm about to go over this chapter. I took lots of notes. I'm about to go over this business. I'm going to say first and foremost, I'm probably going to posit some theories that are totally off base and totally wrong. And y'all are going to sit there and snicker and be like, you're so wrong, Romania. Snicker behind your screens. But just let me be until we find out in the next chapters and what's going on. Because clearly, MXTX does this. She gives you these chapters. She's like, here's some stuff that's kind of crazy, right? And then 4 chapters later, we'll get an explanation. And it's like, okay. And then she will set some stuff up that has not gotten an explanation yet. But in the long game, we're going to find out. And so don't spoil me. Don't confirm or deconfirm the theories and be like, oh, Romania, you're not right. That can't be true. Just let me figure it out. I may have some dumb moments, but I'm going to get there. I'm the little butterfly that is hanging on Xie Lian's finger that's flapping its wings the hardest, trying to figure it out, right? Oh, God. These chapters were wild and did not go anywhere I thought we were. I knew we were going to get to Qi Rong eventually. I didn't think we'd just turn a corner and Hua Cheng be like, hey, you want to go help me kill a guy? help me go kill like a god-level ghost? Let's go do this. Like, this is what we do on our dates. Xie Lian and Hua Cheng go and destroy calamities. It's what we do on our dates. It's our flirting. Oh my God. So yeah, let's talk about these chapters. So it's just like the first part, the first chapter 48 was like the tamest chapter of the bunch. Like once we get into Qi Rong's lair, it gets all wonky. But and then we're gonna talk about the dolls and everything. And Huckleberry is like, I'm so giddy that he thinks that he must be giddy and we must play. So if he jumps up during all of this, y'all will understand. But okay, I do want to point out, I do want to make note of something. I wanted to look up 2 things really quick, because there is a translation thing between the chapters. There's a translation thing with what Lan Shanchu becomes. That he becomes a doll. Okay, Budao Wong. Did I say that right? I feel like Budao Wong. Okay, let's see what's this doll? Do they look similar? No, they look different. So interesting. Okay. We'll talk when we talk about the dolls, we'll go over and kind of explain that, because they do look different. That's so weird. But yeah, so basically we have this thing, the whole chapter itself, the chapter titles 48 through 50 are in a set together, and they're parts 1, 2, and 3, but they are mainly gone Adroit dice solely for the safety of 1, which Adroit, I'm not exactly familiar with what Adroit means, but dice for the safety of 1. Hua Cheng gave Xie Lian the dice to save Xie Lian, and only Xie Lian. It would just not work on anyone else. It's just dice to help Xie Lian, because that's Hua Cheng. He's like, I don't care about any of these other people. I just care about you, Xie Lian. So I'm going to say green for Qi Rong. I'm going to say green for Qi Rong. Qi Rong deserves green. So yeah, so the dice. So basically I'm just going to put chapter 48. We're going to do these by chapters, okay? As my dog hacks up a lung in the corner. So the dice, we come to find out, is really only to help Xie Lian get to Hua Cheng. that's their purpose. They are mainly to keep Xie Lian safe. And how do we keep Xie Lian safe? By taking him to his man. Hua Cheng's like, I can save you, Xie Lian. Ah! Okay, so basically the Windmaster, I like that so Mu Qing and Feng Xin, they're like, how do we chase after him? How do we chase after Hua Cheng and go after him? And the Windmaster's like, oh, I know, those doors. You just roll the dice, you gotta roll a certain number, and they'll take you to wherever they are on the other side of the door. And so Mu Qing and Feng Xin, who don't think it through, they're like, oh yeah, sure, let's do that. They instantly roll the dice, but Hua Cheng explains to Xie Lian, Xie Lian's like, so where do those dice take you? Like, if you don't roll right? And he's like, it takes you to your worst fears. Now, the question is, back at the manor, the question is, were the worms and the cannibals, were all those just regional things that were close? I feel like they were just regional things, because Xie Lian makes note that the cannibals were associated with the mountains, the worms would be associated underneath the manor. So those all seem like regional things that are just creepy, that were near the manor, that Hua Cheng set up as traps. But outside of Paradise Manor, outside of the Ghost City, he has it to where it'll take you to your worst fears. Feng Xin, again, isn't Feng Xin the one with the really large penis? Did we establish that? And I think we did, which is ironic because he's terrified of women. And I'm like, Feng Xin, you might have a decent chance if you just weren't afraid of women. But he's terrified of women, so being in a woman's bath is the scariest thing to him. And then oddly enough, the weirdest thing for Mu Qing are crocodiles, which I guess, some people are afraid of. My aunt's afraid of frogs, so I guess that would be that. But these aren't normal crocodiles. These marsh crocodiles have like human arms and legs. MXTX, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? What? It's the weirdest thing, right? And so, yeah, they go there and they're trying to get Xie Lian, but they can't go. And so I thought in the moment, before Hua Cheng said the dice would take Xie Lian always to him, I thought for a moment, I was like, well, maybe way back in the chapters where Xie Lian, the thing he was most afraid of was running into Hua Cheng, because he was afraid, he felt so guilty for kind of leading Hua Cheng on. He was afraid to mess with him and see him. And so he was like, oh, I hope I don't see Hua Cheng. And he, figures out that I've been lying to him. And then whose lap does he fall into? Hua Cheng. So at the time I was like, oh, well, maybe Xie Lian's biggest fear was seeing Hua Cheng, and it took him to him. But then we find out that no, Hua Cheng just gave him the magic dice, being like, these will always take you to me. Xie Lian's like, oh, So I also love that in the midst of all of this, in the midst of this madness that is happening, that Feng Xin and Mu Qing, I want to call them by their ship names already, they are just arguing at full blast. They are finally just letting it all out of their systems. They have for hundreds of years built up all of this animosity towards one another and guilt over leaving Xie Lian, and all these emotions have just festered for hundreds of years. And now that Xie Lian's been kidnapped by Hua Cheng, they're just letting it all out, right? And so they're just sitting there arguing and cursing in the mud against these crocodiles, and the heavenly realm, they're just delighted by it. They're like, these two are just it's like the heavenly realm puts on such airs that they're here for the fight. The heavenly realm is cheering them on, right? Cheering them on for their genuineness. It's for them being genuine. They're not putting on a face. They're not putting on a persona. They're being themselves. And again, this series has made a big deal of pointing out how the gods of the world, the heavenly officials, are actually no different than humans. They're just more powerful. They're just more powerful and they have bigger status. That's literally it. Which is funny, it's almost a play, it is a play on the class system, right? Because it's the heavenly officials are the wealthy class, the wealthiest class that are supported by the working class. So you have your upper class, your heavenly realm, which are your elites, but they are only there because of the work of those underneath them, right? And they, in the heavenly realm, have this ego over the people to help get them there to begin with. So that's the irony of it. MXTX is making a nice little commentary about that. But it's funny because the heavenly officials are oh, these guys are being real. They're letting it loose and being themselves. And it just shows how utterly human they are, right? Right. So yeah, they're just delighting in it about, not worrying about their face. They think it's hilarious. And meanwhile, Hua Cheng is like, Xie Lian's like, well, what would I have to roll? What happens if I roll something? And Hua Cheng's like, doesn't matter. Whatever you roll is going to take you to me. And that is such a flirty line. Like, he's so flirty there. And Xie Lian's just like, really? Really? Like, Xie Lian doesn't know what to do with it. He suddenly feels awkward because he's like, he doesn't know how to deal. He's just like, are you flirting with me, sir? And the answer is a major yes, but Xie Lian is oblivious and doesn't quite realize it. And then Lan Chuanqiu shows up. Lan Chuanqiu in all of this, he's just like, screw it. He's like, I'm not sitting around waiting on anybody. So I want to put Lan Chuanqiu here, that he decides to go and duel Xie Lian. He's like, forget it. And he brings his sword, which is Feng Shen. Very interesting, right? Feng Shen, very interesting, because it was Feng Shen, they say that it means affection of a young woman. Now, okay, back to the four tales, right? There was the man whose sword was broken. There was the prince who pleased God. There was the young man who poured wine. And there was like a woman, wasn't there? There was a woman involved in that four tale as well, right? And I feel like we're going to go back to those four tales as we go, right? But that's interesting that there's... And honestly, the crazy thing is, I love Feng Shen's design. It like has a black jade blade with silver running through it. I love the design of it. It looks so cool. It sounds neat. And he blocks the path with this giant ass sword. And then the sword, like when it gets in Xie Lian's hand, starts to like let out a faint moan. I was like, oh. So yeah, which these swords have spirits in them. So the sword has like a female spirit in it, right? So the sword like moans in Xie Lian's hand, and Hua Cheng is like, okay. I feel like Feng Shen and Eming would get along really well together, right? Maybe that's the intent. Maybe those two swords are going to get together by the end, right? I feel like that's the case, which it's kind of a cool thing because Xie Lian is like he's a martial god, or he was, and so he's a really good swordsman. So this sword is like so excited to be in the grips of Xie Lian, and Hua Cheng is just like, that could be me. I love it. Hua Cheng's into it. But Xie Lian, he uses Ruyi. He's like, nope. He's like, he finally says, fine, you're not going to leave us alone. You're going to keep following us to the ends of the earth until I duel you. Fine, I'll duel you. And Lan Chuanqiu was like, good, I don't want to have any regrets. And Xie Lian's like, yeah, okay, bye. And he uses Ruyi to bind up Lan Chuanqiu. And I like that Chuanqiu's like, well, that's not fair. That's not fair at all. And Xie Lian's like, he's like, that's not manly. You're not being manly being fight. And the crazy thing is, it all comes back to Xie Lian being like, I don't care. Xie Lian's like, I stopped caring about myself a long time ago. He's like, I've not been manly for a while. I've cross-dressed as a bride at the beginning of this story. I've told people that I have erectile dysfunction, which is not true. I just don't want to deal with them. He's like, being manly is the last thing I care about, if you're being honest. And it's like, and he's like, he just doesn't care. And so he's like, it doesn't matter. And he tells Chuanqiu, he's like, look, he's like, I don't care if I cheated. I don't care if it's fair. He's like, I didn't want to fight you. You didn't specify the rules. So you left a loophole there and I took advantage of it because I don't want to fight you, but you wouldn't leave me alone. So he's like, what did you expect me to do? And so I love that he just tells me it doesn't matter. He's like, if I fought you, I'd kill you. And I don't want to do that. So I'm going to do any means necessary to not have to fight you. And I love that Lan Chuanqiu, he's like, why are you so different? He's like, you're so different than you were back when we knew each other. And Xie Lian's like, you didn't know me. If you've ever watched Yona the Dawn or read Yona the Dawn, you need to. It's a really good series. But there's a character in that series that tells another character, the other character's like, I thought I knew you. And he's like, no, you didn't. And so that's kind of the vibes that I got from Xie Lian, was that he was like, no, he's like, I'm not who you thought I was. He's like, you were around me for 5 years. I'm 800 years old. You knew me for 5 years out of 800. That was barely a blink of an eye. He's like, how I was then is not who I am entirely, right? And so I feel like, though, and I've left a big space here to do like more with the timeline because we're going to need to talk about that as we go. But he's like, yeah, no. He's like, he says, don't get in others' way. He's like, remember that story that we talked about? Like how maybe you shouldn't interfere. Maybe the third party should not have interfered to begin with. He's like, that's how this is now. Leave Hua Cheng and I alone. You should not have interfered. You should have just let it go. And he's like, I'm letting it go. And just, I just love that he's like, stay out of the way. And Hua Cheng's loving it. He's like, He's like, tell him off. He's like, tell him off, Xie Lian. But yeah, Xie Lian, I just love that he's like, no. He's like, this is how I've always been. He's like, I'm not any different. He's like, I've always been this way. He's like, you just only knew one part of me, right? And so we get the idea, though, in this, we get the idea that Xie Lian, that Chonchu, he talks about how he's thinking about how Xie Lian was back when he was Feng Shen. And we see that, like, the Shanli people, they continued, even after they were taken over by Yong'an, and Yong'an, like, absorbed Shanli and converted it, there were still some people of the old kingdom left. So let's go back to this timeline. And I know I don't want those of you that have read the novel, I know you know the entire timeline left and right. Like I said, by the end of this story, I will have Conspiracy Board Sama out here and we'll map out the whole darn thing. But we're just going to do a condensed version. And if I'm leaving something out, let me be. So 800 years ago, we had 800 years prior, we had Xie Lian, he ascended at 17. Okay. And then 3 years later, 797 years ago, he was demoted. And we assume around this time, there was the human face disease, the white calamity. It was just a really bad time. Just not a good day for Xie Lian. Then a long time passes, like 500 years pass. A long time. 500 years pass. Now, what was going on during those 500 years? That's a big chunk of time. We don't know. We're going to find out eventually, but we don't know, right? Maybe, I'm assuming maybe the second ascension was in there somewhere, but I don't know. It was only like 15 to 30 minutes, so it wasn't very long, but we don't know. We don't know that part yet. We've got 6 volumes to go. We'll find out. But what we do know is that 300 years ago, right? 300 years ago, Xie Lian, he saved Lan Chanchu, right? He saved him and became the Goshi. And was not, I'm going to put in here, not in a good mood. Because he was really cold, and he had a mask, and he was not like himself, right? So he was just not in a good mood. Just not having it, right? We'll just leave it with that, okay? And then 5 years after that, like 295 years ago, that's when supposedly he killed Lan Chanchu's family and was imprisoned in a coffin. So there's that. And then 200 years ago is the whole incident with Banyu. Banyu and General Hua, all that business. So somewhere in that 100 years, Xie Lian became a lot more humble. He became a lot more humble. And then after this period, and I'm going to just put this over here in the present time, somewhere in the present, and this is the third ascension, all right? Somewhere in here, we have our scrap collecting years. Which honestly though, he was a scrap collector around Banyu too. So for the last somehow when he got out of the coffin, somewhere in this time period, he became a scrap collector and kind of went from there, right? And kind of turned over a new leaf and sort of became different. But he's been Xie Lian's been jaded ever since the first emotion, right? He's been jaded ever since then. It's just built up. The 500 years is really interesting to me because that's a long period of time. That's like more than all of this combined. So what happened? So I'm assuming we're going to find out as we go. We'll just see. So yeah, but that part's really interesting. So we've got all that established, right? But we established that Shanli's people, they continued to have their cultural beliefs. Everything was still set up, even after Yongin took over. And they say for a while, the Yongin people were not nice to the Shanli people and tried to, like, eradicate them and kick them out. And it was just constant civil wars between the people for a very long time. Until Lan Chuanchu's family supposedly came along. And they were a few generations into Yongin developing, and they wanted to show kindness and compassion to the Shanli people and integrate them back into the kingdom and, like, not be nice to them and stop all of the fighting. Okay. And we established a few chapters ago that originally Yongin was going to be totally different than Shanla and ends up becoming the same thing. So I don't know if them ending up kind of going back into that decadence and elitism kind of started with Chuanchu's family or what was involved in that. I'm not sure. But no one knew what side Xie Lian was on as the Goshi. If he was siding with Shanla or if he was siding with Yongin. Nobody knew at the time. Even after the bloodbath apparently had created, it didn't matter because no matter whose side Xie Lian had been on as the Goshi, after the bloodbath and after Chuanchu's family was killed, it just all went downhill. There was all this dissent. There was just factions that were divided. The nobles ended up requesting to annihilate the rest of Shanla. And Lan Chuanchu said no. He overrid the request and denied it. So, but there's this really cool thing about Chuanchu that says that he still wanted to stick up for the people of Shanla. And we find out that their last royal family member was Anla. So the last royal family member was this prince that was friends with Lan Chuanchu. Okay. So, like, a relative of Xie Lian's, I'm assuming, that lived on. He was the last remaining family member. Kind of like Pei Ming and Pei Jr. Anla would be, like, the last family member that was related to Xie Lian, maybe. And so he was friends with Lan Chuanchu, right? And he supposedly died. But they established that he felt that the more good he did, the more wronged he felt. Because... And I love this part here that Chuanchu said it wasn't because I felt I was doing something that wasn't worthwhile. I felt like I was doing good and helping people, but it was so frustrating because it was not reciprocated. No matter how much good he did, people wouldn't do the same back. And that became frustrating. He felt like what he was doing wasn't making a difference like what he thought. So yeah, Lan Chuanchu is very, very, very similar to Xie Lian at 17. Very similar, right? He felt that he was wrong, it wasn't reciprocated, like Xie Lian. And Xie Lian, he's like, I just want you to explain, why did you kill my family? Why did you do this? Like, why? And Xie Lian can't explain. And there's a part of me that's like, well, does Xie Lian just genuinely not remember? Has he blocked that completely out? Or is there another reason? So, Xie Lian cannot explain Lan Chuanchu's family death. He just can't find a way to explain it. Either he doesn't want to talk about it, which eventually I feel like it's all going to come out in the wash eventually, but right now he's still keeping it close to the vest, or he genuinely doesn't remember and he's blocked it out of his mind. Is like, nope, erased that memory, didn't keep that one. And Chuanchu gets really mad. And that's when Xie Lian's like, I'm not who you thought I was. He's like, I'm not the person you thought that you remembered that I was. He's like, no. Because Chuanchu's like, well, who is the real you? Are you the cold but studious Goshi, or are you the scrap collector? What are you? And Xie Lian's like, they're all me. Every iteration of me is part of who I am. He's like, yeah. He's like, I am the scrap collector, but I was also the martial god. But I'm also the god of misfortune. He's like, I'm everything. He's like, that's just who I am. I'm a layered and complex person. And that's kind of the point. And I feel like that's MXTX making a big statement about that humans are complex. We can be kind, but also snarky. We can have dark sides to us. We can do things in our past where we regret and are not proud of, and we try to change. She's trying to say, like, people are infinitely complex, and Xie Lian is an 800-year-old version of that. He's like, of course he would be different, right? He's like, that was 300 years ago. He's like, I'm a different person. That's just how things work. You change, right? That's just part of it. And Lan Shanchu, he can't quite get it. And the part that got me was Xie Lian saying, the lessons I taught you as a 17-year-old are not the ones that you're learning now. I was like, oh shit. Like Xie Lian is savage when he wants to be. Like when Xie Lian, he's our sweet little cinnamon bun. When he decides to be a spicy churro and just dip into the flaming hot sauce, that is him. Because yeah, he's like how I treated you. He's like, how I treated you at 17 is not the same as now. And it's almost kind of like an insult. It's almost kind of like a parent saying like, yeah, when you were a kid, I had to explain things to you a certain way because you were a child and you didn't know any better. Now that you're an adult, I can explain things a little different. It's kind of like when you grow up and when you're a kid and your parent explains something to you. And then when you're like later on in like your mid-20s or something, you're like, hey, remember when you told me that? And your parent's like, yeah, I said that because you were a kid. This is the real deal. That's kind of what this moment is. Xie Lian is like, I told you and was like that with you because you were 17 and you weren't ready to handle the other stuff. And then Shanchu, he's like, were you trying to just create a trial for me like you had before to see what I would do to try to make me ascend? Like, is that it seems like he's like, were you testing me as you were tested? Is that it? He's like, were you trying to get me to ascend like you ascended through the same means? And Xie Lian doesn't answer him. Doesn't answer. So there's a possibility that's the case. A possibility that's not, but there's a possibility that it's the case. And Shanchu gets so mad. And he's like, I will never be like you. He's like, no. He's like, I'm never going to be filled with hatred and all this jadedness. I'm going to be this paragon, ultimate paragon of truth and justice. I'm never going to be like you. And Xie Lian, when he says that Lan Shanchu will not be like him, for him to laugh so hard and yell, good. That was creepy. That was just like, oh shit. Like Xie Lian is just like, good, I don't want you to be like me. He's like, because I hate myself. He's like, I don't want anybody to feel like me. And it's like, oh my God. It's like, and this whole time, Hua Cheng has been just coldly staring around like, okay. And I feel like Hua Cheng at this point gets a little bit upset because I feel like Hua Cheng's like, okay, Xie Lian, you've had your fun, but now you're starting to degrade yourself, and Hua Cheng's not about that life. So he's just like, you know what? Because here's the deal. They couldn't just leave Shanchu there. One, Shanchu is a himbo, and he would just kept following them and making a scene and being a bother, and Hua Cheng's like, I ain't got time for that. And they can't let him go back to the heavenly realm because he'll tell them where they are. He knows where Hua Cheng and Xie Lian are now. And if he tells the heavenly realm, then the officials will just use the distance shortening spell and go after them really quickly and catch up with them and probably figure out whatever Hua Cheng's plan was, which was to infiltrate Qi Rong's lair, as it turns out. So they're like, well, we have to keep Shanchu with us, but we can't let him just walk around freely because he's an idiot. And he'll make a scene and ruin this for us. So what can we do? And Hua Cheng's like, I know. I'll turn him into a doll. It's like, why not? You know? But here's the thing. The translation was a little off because there was two translations. There was the one in the digital version that I have. There was one of those. But there's also, and I'm trying to look it up here. There's two types of dolls, right? There was these dolls that were Daruma dolls, which I know what Darumas are. That's more like a Japanese thing, right? There's Daruma dolls, and maybe it's Chinese as well. I'm sure in the comments you all will tell me. But I know what a Daruma doll is. I've seen it. I've played Pokemon. I know what that is too. But I know what a Daruma doll is. But then there's also Bedouang doll. That's what he's also called. Bedouang. So I wrote it down. What was it? It said it was also called it a different kind of doll. Like he was they made him a doll and it was like a Bidwong doll. But they look different. One, Daruma dolls, I've seen a Daruma before, so I knew what it looked like. I figured Daruma was right because it described him as being like a gourd and being all chubby and cute and stuff. But the other doll looks slightly different. So I'm sure in the comments you all will tell me which one it is. But they turned him into a doll! They literally turned him into a doll. And then Hua Cheng's just like, I guess I'll hold on to him. It's like we ghost bust, we put Banyu into jars, into pickle jars. We turn Lan Chu into a little figurine. Oh my god. But yeah, Hua Cheng's like, we ain't got time for you, Chu. You become a doll. We gotta go to this cave. What I really thought was gonna happen, because I'm a naive summer child, is I thought that Xie Lian and Hua Cheng were gonna like go into this cave and have like sexy times. I'm getting really excited for volume 4, as you all can tell. I really thought they were gonna like go and have this intimate moment in this cave and like have an actual date, and then poor Lan Chu would have to sit in the corner and watch them and be like, this is the most uncomfortable thing ever. I just want to duel you to the death. But by most romantic date possible, I meant we need to go face Qi Rong. I'm so amazed that we're getting to Qi Rong now. I knew we would, but I knew he'd be like the first calamity that we'd probably come in contact with because he's the one that's been talked up the most. But I honestly didn't expect it would happen in these chapters. I had no clue it would happen in these chapters. I thought it was going to be like, if it was going to be this volume, I thought maybe it was going to be like the climax of the volume, you know, like down here. Maybe, not midway. It's like, I thought that was going to be the case. No. So yeah, Hua Cheng leaves him to this cave. And so Hua Cheng, we also established that Lan Chu, he's going to be stuck as a doll for a while because they've established that only Hua Cheng can release him from that spell. It's such a heavy spell that heavenly officials can't do anything about it. And it's like, well, what do we do, right? So he's just stuck as a doll. And so Xie Lian, they don't leave the sword. Xie Lian keeps Feng Shen, straps it to his back, keeps the sword with him. There's a part of me that wonders if Xie Lian is backtracking. If Hua Cheng is helping Xie Lian get back to his roots, right? If Xie Lian's helping him go back in the past, right? And like figure out who he really is. And like go back to the glory that he once was. I think that that's what Hua Cheng's doing. I think Hua Cheng is trying to get him back to that very first ascension, to that state of being a god that he was at the beginning. That's what Hua Cheng is trying to get him to go back to. Maybe not become the person that he once was, because he can't do that. It's too late. He's changed. But to get back to that status of being not the god of misfortune, not the scrap collecting god, but the original martial god he was at the beginning. To go back to his roots, but now do it with a sense of who he is after all this time. Maybe? Because yeah, when we started out, it was in the present time, and we've slowly gone back to Banyu, and we've found Banyu, we've collected her, we've come to grips with that part of Xie Lian's past, and now we're getting to this part of Xie Lian's past, which is the whole deal with Yong'an, and he's getting Feng Shen back, he's dealing with Lan Chu. So I'm like, are we going to work our way backwards back to the White Calamity? Again, I think White Calamity's last boss. I think White Calamity's going to be final boss mode, right? But Qi Rong kind of messes up the whole timeline. We'll find out what that means, and we'll talk about that. But yeah, takes Feng Shen with him, and they note that the cave is not the enticing, seductive cave, the seductive, enticing place that Paradise Manor was. No, he talks about how, like, in Paradise Manor, there was this beautiful singing. It was very melodic and seductive. Here, it sounds like chaos and hell. Like, it sounds like a bunch of, like, screaming demons. I'm like, fitting for Qi Rong. Fitting. But yeah, it's very chaotic, demonic. And they enter the cave, and then we see, the moment we saw the little green ghost with the flames, I was like, oh my god, it's Qi Rong. The little lanterns, we're here, we're finally here. And so they start out by Hua Cheng, who has the Master of Appearances. Hua Cheng makes them look like the little green ghosts. He makes their appearances like little green. I was just imagining this in the Donghua, like seeing them as little green ghosts, like going around with all the other ones. And then later on, they turn into normal, and put that in quotation marks, normal people. so they can blend in with the food, right? Blend in with the food. Why not? So yeah, so they go on here. I like underlined in big letters, we're at Qi Rong, so I was like freaking out. And so his cave is like a beehive or an anthill. I like the idea that it's like a beehive. It's just tunnels and caves within caves. It's like a labyrinth in itself, right? Which is pretty apt to describing the feelings in these chapters because it feels like we're delving into a web. It feels very insect-like. Qi Rong, like anthill, beehive, a web. It feels very insect-like, right? So I'm going to put Qi Rong right here. And what we know about our Green Lantern ghost, who is... this chapter with Qi Rong, but yeah. So the thing about it is, Hua Cheng seems pretty adept of going around like he's been here before. Like he's made his way around to figure out where Qi Rong's lair is. And I have the feeling that Hua Cheng has been scouting out Qi Rong's place for a long time now, but he hasn't found the opportunity to get in there and attack him. And with Xie Lian, he's like, well, I'll take Xie Lian with me and we'll get the job done. We can make it work. I feel like that's what's happened here. But Xie Lian, we'll make note of Xie Lian. Xie Lian says that he is not good with fights. And what he means by that is not that he's not a good fighter. He's a martial god. He's a skilled fighter and a swordsman. That's not what he's not good at. He says that he's not good with fights and the aftermath. Which, if that's not a statement, because everything we know about Xie Lian so far suggests that's very true. The whole thing with the White Calamity, however that ended up, the aftermath was not good. The whole thing with him as Feng Xin and the family dying and the aftermath of that was not good. The whole thing of him trying to be General Hua and breaking up the fight and ended up being a corpse in the middle of the river did not end good. And so there's a pattern. Like Xie Lian's like, whenever I get into fights, I've got all this misfortune and bad luck surrounding me that the aftermath is just really bad. So he's like, I try to not fight if I don't have to. Which also explains why he didn't want to fight Shan Chu. He's like, we better not go there. Might not end up good. And so but Hua Cheng says he wants Lan Chanchu to meet someone. Okay? Hua Cheng seems to know that Qi Rong looks like Xie Lian. So I'm going to just go ahead and put it up here that he looks, supposedly, like Xie Lian. Now, and wears a mask. I don't know, like the Guo Shi of Feng Xin. Just wears a mask like him. I don't know. What are we gonna do with that? And somehow Xie Lian knows him. Xie Lian knows him. Just knows who he was when he was alive. Knows him when he was alive. Excuse me? Excuse me? MXTX? What we doing? What? So, yeah. So, Hua Cheng wants Lan Chanchu to go and see him, right? To see someone. We know it's Qi Rong at this point. And so, Qi Rong, we also established, is the only supreme that eats humans. I didn't figure like the ship sailing Blackwater would eat humans. That just didn't seem right. And Hua Cheng, no. And the White Calamity seems like it wants to cause the face disease more than anything, so it doesn't eat people either. But Qi Rong eating people. It's kind of creepy, right? It's kind of creepy. They eats flesh. Hua Cheng has this plan to blend in with the food. The palm thing. MXTX and her hand fetish. Her sexual hand fetish. I was like, in Modao Zushi, it was every time Wu Xin and Lan Wangji touched hands, it was like intercourse. And here, it's like Xie Lian, like just riding in the palm of Hua Cheng. I was just like, why you doing this? Okay. But it's so like romantic where he's like, save. He's like, we need to save the people. We need to save the people here. And Hua Cheng is of course like, look at you, Xie Lian, wanting to save everybody like you always do. Like, you know. And so I love that Hua Cheng's like, but he doesn't reply. He just folds his hand. And I love in that moment when Xie Lian first grabs Hua Cheng's hand, Hua Cheng's like he's still freezing up away. He still doesn't like the touch aspect. He's like, no touchy. But Xie Lian doing that, he's like, I have to. This is the only way I can communicate this with you. And Hua Cheng's like, okay, all right, I'll let it go. Well, don't know what to do with myself right now, right? He's like, but I'll let it go. And so they exit this tunnel into this large cave where, of course, just going back to volume 1, it's a big forest of hanging corpses that are upside down. Although these corpses are no longer bloody. They've been there so long that they've dried up and shriveled up, or they've either been there so long they've dried and shriveled up, or Qi Rong has like sucked them bone dry. Either way, and the fact that they've like crystallized with salt, I'm like, is it from their tears where the corpses were crying that it's crystallized into salt? Or is it just they're in a cave and, you know, like you have like stalactites and stalagmites, like the salt deposits like in the caves? Maybe that's part of it. Could be both. I thought that was really interesting. But yeah. And so then Hua Cheng's like, don't you touch them. And then from there, it's like you go back through a curtain. It felt like Ursula's lair from The Little Mermaid. It felt like, you know, you go through the forest of all the like the people, the mer people that have been turned into like the creatures that are like grabbing at Ariel. I feel like, and there's the cave, and inside the cave is like, in Little Mermaid, it's not very grandeur, but I felt like the corpse forest was like that little entrance into Ursula's cave. Except once you get in, it's very, there's all this gold and jade and jewelry and things of that nature. And so he knows, based on his voice and his name. So Xie Lian has talked to Qi Rong in the past when he was alive, or as a ghost, we don't know, but he's talked to him before. But Qi Rong has this thing where he has all this gold and objects, and it's like trying to be decadent, but because he's a creepy ghost that eats people, it just doesn't come across right. It's just like, it's fake. It doesn't read right. So I'm like, was Qi Rong a citizen of Zhongli? Was he a citizen of Zhongli? Is he related to Xie Lian? Is he a relative? Is Qi Rong like a cousin that was around back during all this? Was that the case? Was he a relative? But I feel like it was around this time because Hua Cheng keeps bringing up Anla, which is the one that Chanshu knows. So was Qi Rong around during this time? Could he have like masked himself as the Goshi function to set Xie Lian up? Was he actually the one that killed Chanshu's family? And that's why Hua Cheng's brought... Because Hua Cheng is like a fountain of knowledge. Hua Cheng has spent the last 800 years, to our knowledge, gathering up information to like clear his boo's name. To be like, my bae is innocent. He has done nothing wrong. I'm here to support him and prove how he is great. And so I feel like Hua Cheng has like gathered up all this intel over the years. And maybe Hua Cheng found out that maybe... It could either go two ways, right? Either Xie Lian did actually kill Chanshu's family and there was a reason, and we'll find out that reason for it. Or another theory could be that Qi Rong was actually the one that killed Anla and Chanshu's family and posed as the Goshi Fengshen and framed Xie Lian, and Xie Lian was just too nice to deny it. I could see Xie Lian being too nice to deny it and being like, yeah, it was me. And be like, why not? Or he took the blame for it, trying to save Qi Rong from something, and Qi Rong is just pissed off about it, being like, you sacrificed yourself to save my name, blah, 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 and end up being a ghost anyway. I don't know, but it's interesting that you have someone that looks like Xie Lian, wears a mask like the Goshi Fengshen, and just happened to be around supposedly at the same time, maybe, as Long Chanshu and Xie Lian during all this jazz, and Hua Cheng wants to bring Chanshu around to meet him. Seems like there could be some connection there, right? And he's all obsessed with like these gold and decadent objects, which we've established the people of Shanla were like excessive, so maybe he was a member of Shanla and was like that. And if we're talking about the civil wars, could he have been part of the riots and stuff and trying to like revolt against Yong'an, and that's how he became a ghost? Well, I guess we'll find out. But I'm just going to theorize about it until then. So yeah, so then we get to the dining room where there's all this decadent gold and objects there, and then it's contrasted by this giant cauldron that could fit 10 people into it that it's got like blood bubbling in it, that he's gonna like burn these people alive and boil them to death, right? And we see that Hua Cheng is not mad because of the cauldron, not mad because of the gold and everything. His eyes are blazing with fury because in front of the chair, in front of Qi Rong's throne, is a statue of Xie Lian kneeling, like prostrating himself before Qi Rong. And Hua Cheng's like, you are desecrating the image of my boo, of my man. I won't stand for it. And he's really pissed off about it. It was described as like a dog with its tail between its legs. And so, yeah. So then we find out a little bit about when the kingdom of Shanli first fell. Right? So around the time that the kingdom first fell, we get a little bit of information about the statues, which then, again, we're going to talk about the timeline, because I think Qi Rong, we talk about that and how he could be related over here with the White Calamity and all that business. I want to make note about this, that they make note that when Shanli fell, around the time he was demoted, around this time, within 3 years, like he had been like height of his powers, ascended, everybody worshipped him, he was at the height of his fame, and when the human face disease and all that came about and everything went downhill in a hurry, then they made these begging statues of Xie Lian that they spat on, that they kicked, that they used as step stools to get into their homes. They just desecrated it. And so if Hua Cheng was around during that time and was in love with Xie Lian, of course he would hate those statues, because if he worshipped Xie Lian, that's the ultimate insult to the person he loves. So of course he'd be pissed off. The question is, though, because it's kind of made established that Qi Rong was maybe around during this time with Chanshu, but also to get one of these statues, that was 500 years ago when those statues came about. So, right, either the statues were around when Shanli first fell, when Xie Lian was first demoted, or they were around when Shanli was being absorbed by Yong'an. That could be it. It could be that the statues were maintained for 500 years, and then we're still around when Yong'an absorbed Shanli. That could be. So it could be that Qi Rong's just around this timeline. But if he was around during this timeline and like took a statue home with him, like as a souvenir, back to his cave, it's weird, right? But the point is, the sad part about all this is that Xie Lian was forced to walk around that very kingdom and see statues of him being spat upon and kicked and having to prostrate himself in front of it. And we've established that how people portray you in this world is how you end up being. So he ends up being portrayed as just being this stray dog that's been kicked. And that's what he becomes. And so it's kind of sad. It's like he had to walk around seeing his back and seeing him being spat on over and over again. Like that would break you, right? And we can think by this point, Feng Xin and Mu Qing have left him, so he's all alone watching as this once beautiful like image of himself and his people is just completely and utterly destroyed. It's pretty sad, right? It's pretty terrifying. And so he says that when Kingdom first fell, they relieved their anger by burning the temples, by the 8,000 prince temples. They robbed the gems from his sword and stripped his attire of gold. It feels like Cinderella. It feels like the stepsisters ripping of the dress and taking all the stuff away from Cinderella. That's what it feels like. And he just constantly saw like images of himself fallen. And that's awful, right? So, speaking of awful, Qi Rong, right? I don't know. Qi Rong is something else. He is something else. I don't hate him, but I'm like, he's much more crass and vulgar than I imagine. I was thinking he'd be more like trash king. He is indeed a trash king. He is the king of trash. Absolutely. He is obscene and vulgar and spiteful and just resentful and mean. Just a meanie. Meanie indeed. He is Oscar the Grouch coming out of that trash can to trash talk Pei Ming. He hates Pei Ming. I'm amazed. He hates Pei Ming so much. And he's not right. That's the crazy thing, is that he's not very well informed, or he has this opinion and thinks it's the truth when it's not. Calling Pei Jr. a hyena who hugged the bitch leg of man-whore Pei to ascend. What a mouthful. Now, he is wrong, and Xie Lian points out how he's wrong. He thinks that Pei Jr. only ascended because of nepotism, because of Pei Ming. But as we know from the Manhua arc, and as Xie Lian knows, that's not the case. Pei Ming had nothing to do with Pei Jr.'s ascension. Not really. Not in the long run, right? And so he calls him an exiled wild dog who ruined his plans, along with... And at first I was like, when he said ruined his plans, I was like, oh, with Shang-Chi, because he shows up to take Shang-Chi away in the first arc. I'm like, so that's how he ruined his plans. But that wasn't quite it. It was part of it, but that wasn't quite it. So we come to find out, as I get to my other page of notes here, we come to find out that, well, one, Xie Lian knows Qi Rong. And at that point, as we're learning about this, we find out that there's an unspoken rule amongst demons and ghosts that they hide their real names and bury their past lives, which kind of makes sense with Banyu. Banyu is like, it's a name. It's not necessarily her legal name from birth, but it's the name that she was given. And she didn't really talk about her past life until Xie Lian brought it up with her. So, but he thought that Qi Rong is like, oh, well, couldn't be the same Qi Rong. He would have changed his name if he became a ghost, especially a supreme or a would-be, right? Especially one of the calamities. He would have changed his name. He wouldn't be the same one, right? But he knows who he is. And in true MXTX fashion, she doesn't explain how Xie Lian knows him. It's just like, oh yeah, I know him. And then we move on, and I'm like, wait, back up. How do you know him? Wait, go back, Xie Lian. You remember more. It's like, damn it. We're going to find out. But I was like, oh, how dare you? And so he knows him, supposedly. But Qi Rong, I went back and read this version after I stopped the video and stopped screaming. I went back and read this version to take notes. And in this version, I liked that they described it as Qi Rong was obsessed with the kneeling statue of Xie Lian, and that his voice sounded familiar. So him being obsessed with Xie Lian, when he figures out it's Xie Lian there, I'm going to be very, very curious to see what in the world he's going to say and what's he going to do. I was like, I did not think that Qi Rong and Xie Lian were going to be connected in any way, shape, or form. Didn't think we were doing that in this. But I thought Qi Rong and Xie Lian would just be like, let's go meet the Calamity. But he knows the Calamity personally. So he knows 2 Calamities personally. 3 Calamities personally. Xie Lian, our god of misfortune, personally knows 3 of the 4 Calamities to our knowledge. He knows the White Calamity from when he fought him. He knows Hua Cheng from now, and maybe this whole time. And he knows Qi Rong from we don't know when. And we don't know anything about the ship, the sink shipping Blackwater yet to know if Xie Lian knows him. But I wouldn't be surprised at this point if he knew him. Like Xie Lian knowing all the Calamities. But that's so funny because he knew the tales, but he said he didn't know the Calamities. But he does know the Calamities. So it's like, Xie Lian, you are such an unreliable narrator. What are we going to do with you? You know? Oh, MXTX. Oh my god. So yeah, all the green ghosts call him king, too. Like we have Xie Lian, who's the crown prince. They call Qi Rong a king, which is interesting. And he talks about how when his home base was destroyed by Hua Cheng, which we established that 50 years ago, okay? 50 years ago, Qi Rong, his realm, was wrecked. Okay, 50 years ago. That's the new thing to add to the timeline. Okay? 50 years ago, Hua Cheng wrecked his stuff and he's regrouped. And so he regrouped, planning to go invade Ghost City again, and he runs into Pei Ming Jr. And Pei Jr. is like in a bad mood because he's just been exiled. But I think the cool thing is Pei Jr. was like, I've just been exiled, but you guys are a bunch of ghosts that are probably going to hurt people, so I'm going to decimate you now. And he just gets rid of them. Pei Jr. I do love Pei Jr. a lot. He's such a sweet bean. But yeah, so Qi Rong's mad about it. And I like that Xie Lian makes the distinction of cursing. Because I do curse on here quite a bit. On my channel, I do curse. But I try, like, I don't mean any ill intent by it. I'm just like, oh my gosh. Like, you know, it's just exclamatory. And I like that Xie Lian makes this distinction, like, because Function dropped the F-bomb a lot in, like, chapter 48, was just like, boom, done. Xie Lian's like, there's a difference between cursing, but not having any ill intent, like just cursing out of temporary anger, is what he says, temporary anger, with no malintent. And then there's Qi Rong, who is crass and obscene and has lots of malintent and is cursing because he genuinely is cursing the people he's talking about. Like, there's a distinction, and Xie Lian makes it with this. But yeah, so Xie Lian, he does talk about, we bring up Shanji again, which I feel like we've talked exhaustingly about it. But Xie Lian is like, well, look, we can't say that it was all Pei Ming's fault. We know now that Shanji had a very big hand in it. And we definitely know that Pei Jr. did not ascend because of Pei Ming. He ascended for a whole different reason. But I liked this line where he says that the skilled may not always ascend, but those that ascend are skilled. I was like, oh, it's so good. But there's a caveat to that. He's like, all the people that ascend are skilled, but it says that nepotism only goes so far. Ability does not equal status. There's an element of luck. I'm like, or there's politics, right? So Xie Lian acknowledges that no, if you ascend, you have skills. Not everybody that's skilled will ascend, but if you ascend, you are a skilled individual. You can't just nepotism your way into it. Pei Ming, just because he's distantly related to Pei Ming, was not going to grant him godhood from the start. The two brothers, the Wind Master and the Water Master, even though they're brothers, they're both skilled enough and ascended because of their skill, not because one was brothers to the other. But it does not mean that they're going to get equal status, because I like that Xie Lian kind of stands up for Pei Jr. and says, well, if that were the case, Pei Jr. would have his own palace by now. He wouldn't have to be riding on the laurels of Pei Ming. And I'm like, that's really nice. Xie Lian sticking up for Pei Jr. there. That was really cool. But yeah, so then Qi Rong just keeps trash talking everybody. He keeps just like cursing the high heavens and just being like the most vulgar. He curses the sink shipping Blackwater, and Hua Cheng says nothing about the White Calamity. Not a thing. Doesn't bring him up at all. And I know that we can say, well, it's because the White Calamity's been defeated. But I think that Qi Rong's like, we don't talk about the White Calamity. We don't bring him up, lest we summon him to bring even more misfortune. The White Calamity, again, is the most terrifying to me. The scariest. Bai Wusheng is like the most scary being in this story so far, and I don't like him. So yeah, like Qi Rong, even when Qi Rong's like, I ain't touching it, not mentioning his name, I'm like, that's a sign, right? That is a sign. But yeah, he's all about trash talking Hua Cheng and the sink ship in Blackwater. And then Qi Rong admits that he set up rumors to pit Sean Zhizhen versus Pei Ming. He started the rumors that Pei Jr. was wanting to take over the West. I was like, he set this whole thing up. Like, he's trying to get Pei... He really has it out for Pei Ming. Qi Rong has, like, got a massive obsession with Pei Ming and wronging him. I'm like, what did he do to you? I'm so fascinated. Maybe that's why Hua Cheng's okay with Pei Ming and respects him, because he's like, oh, Qi Rong hates him, so he can't be that bad. Like, But yeah, he gets all riled up and just talks about spreading the rumors. And Xie Lian, I like that Xie Lian makes a mental note where he's like, when we get back, I've got to tell Junwu to make sure Pei Ming and Chan Shizhen don't fight. Like, he just makes a mental note to himself, right? But then Hua Cheng is like so furious about this statue, and Xie Lian realizes that they're talking about something with the heavenly officials they might need to know for later. So as Hua Cheng's about to like spring into action, Hua Cheng's like, wait. He's like, no. He's like, listen, heavenly officials, like, let's listen for a second. And he does, right? And so Xie Lian's like, look, he's like, he gives him this look. I love, God, like this romantic moment in the midst of all this insanity where Xie Lian like looks earnestly at Hua Cheng and is like, look, thank you for feeling bad for me. I appreciate that. But let's, like, it's just a piece of rock. Sticks and stones cannot break Xie Lian's bones, and words have already hurt him beyond all belief. So at this point, it doesn't matter. He's like, it's just a hunk of rock. It's a statue. Can't hurt me. And so Qi Rong's using it as a footrest in the meantime. And they talk about how they burned all the temples down, like just like what Shanji was doing, Qi Rong. So it makes sense how Qi Rong was easily able to manipulate Shanji because he was already doing what she wanted to do. He was already burning down Pei Ming's temples, so she just jumped on board the bandwagon. And the Green Ghosts, I think it is a good commentary that the Green Ghosts are like, yeah, we were destroying all these temples, and their own devotees just joined in the fun. It's like that herd mentality, that mob mentality that MXTX likes to talk about, that the devotees were destroying their own temples for a god they were worshiping because they just got stuck in the mob mentality. It's like MXTX commenting on that is pretty good. But yeah, so Qi Rong thinks that Shan Jishin is not going to be bothered by all the temples burning and all the stuff they're starting. Like, all this shit they're stirring. He's like, he's probably not going to be bothered by it. But Pei Ming, we've established, is a sore loser and holds grudges and probably will be affected by it. So that's what Qi Rong is banking on, right? And so at this point, Qi Rong is like, I'm ready to go eat some people. Let's do this. And that whole thing about picking out the child and the dad being terrified, like, that was terrifying. And then Xie Lian's like, no, I can't do this. Xie Lian's like, I've got to save these people. We can't let them get eaten. And he springs into action. But Hua Cheng does not want Xie Lian revealed yet. I feel like Hua Cheng wants answers from Qi Rong and wants Chanshu to hear them so that maybe that will change Chanshu's view of Xie Lian. So I think that's what's happening, is that Hua Cheng's like, we'll save all these people. You can spring into action, but not yet. I want Qi Rong to answer some questions first and make Chanshu hear them and you hear them so we can move on. I feel like that's what he's doing. And then Hua Cheng declaring that he's royalty, and Qi Rong's like, excuse me? He's saying that he is Anla, which was Shan Li's royalty. He was a prince, and Qi Rong, like, the doll starts to jerk, has a reaction to that. He was the last of the royal family. And Qi Rong's like, how dare you say that you're him? He's dead. And Hua Cheng's like, yeah, how'd he die? Like, suggesting that Qi Rong killed him. And so Qi Rong's like, seize him. I'm not answering these questions. And so then, yeah, Hua Cheng just springs behind Qi Rong, slams him literally into the ground like an ostrich. And Xie Lian shields the child and the others. Ghosts people, everybody starts to panic. I like that Xie Lian is like, hold on guys, like wait, stop, everything's okay. And they say in the book, of course no one listens to Xie Lian, and he bows his head like, nobody's gonna listen to me. But yeah, that line from Hua Cheng where he says, some things are unstoppable, the setting of the sun in the west, the elephant squashing the ant, me killing you. And it's like, oh my god, like Hua Cheng gets sinister at the end of this of chapter 50 and is like, how dare you be insolent to me? Like, like he hates Qi Rong, because not only does Qi Rong look like Xie Lian, but he completely is the polar opposite of Xie Lian. He's like vulgar and crass to the point where Xie Lian's like, oh my god. And he's like using the statue of Xie Lian in like a prostrating position as a footstool. Like, Hua Cheng's like, you are everything I despise, because you despise the woman, the man that I love, right? Oh my god. Oh my god. And Xie Lian like warns them not to run away. They still do. It's going to sound, he's afraid that all the other ghosts are going to find out. It's going to sound an alarm, right? And so Xie Lian has like a bad feeling about all this. He's like, I don't know if I like where this is heading. This seems like it's gonna go south real quick. And Hua Cheng just like smushing Qi Rong's body into the ground. And then the mask breaks off, like half the mask crumbles, and his face looks exactly like Xie Lian's. So what do we do with that? I don't know. So yeah, I don't know. I'm like, Qi Rong, the whole thing with ghosts and gods, I'm like, they both, and the way that they end that chapter, the way that they end that, I'm gonna go back to that. The green ghost Qi Rong and the crown prince of Shanla, one ghost, one god, the difference of heaven and hell, looked astonishingly alike. And again, is that MXTX's way too of saying that the gods and the ghosts, they really aren't that different. They're very similar, very much the same. Like, it seems like an on the nose, like the gods and ghosts aren't that different. They think that they are, but they are not. And Hua Cheng seems bound and determined to prove that. And am really, really frustrated that this is a cliffhanger. And so, my goal is to wait till Wednesday, till the new Manhua chapter comes out, to read chapters 51 through 53. That's my goal. I'm going to see if I can hold out. I think I can. I have very good willpower, and I have lots of other shows I'm reacting to, so I think I can hold out until Wednesday, but that's going to be it. Once that Manhwa chapter comes out and I get home from work Wednesday night, no, we're going to be reading some Heaven Official's Blessing. So, and plus that'll let me see the comments for this part and the part from last week, so I'm probably going to wait, but it's going to be really hard. I'm going to distract myself with a lot of other shows so that I don't think about it. I'm going to have some major distractions because the urge to binge, to read the next chapters is there. I'm like, I want to read it so badly, but I'm going to hold off. So please don't spoil me, but I'm so curious to see like what you all thought of these chapters specifically. Qi Rong in these chapters. I don't want to know about Qi Rong later on. I don't want to know about what's going to happen next. I don't want to know what's going to happen down the road, but like with these specific chapters, like your thoughts about them, like Hua Cheng and Xie Lian's like hand canoodling about Lan Chanshu becoming a doll, Qi Rong and his vulgarness, about the reveal that him and Xie Lian look alike. And then next week, we'll see what becomes of that. Them looking alike, what do we do with that? So, we'll see. And maybe it has something to do with Xie Lian knowing him. So, yeah. So, I hope you enjoyed this reaction discussion. In the meantime, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I will be back next week, very soon, with chapters 51 through 53 of Heaven Official's Blessing. Bye.